Thank you all for joining the first Black Mental Health Forum. We're just waiting on one more panelist. So while we're waiting for our last panelist, I'll just go ahead and do a quick introduction and get started with a brief video that I wanted to share with everyone, just to reflect some of the issues that the Black community faces. So thank you, panelists, for agreeing to be on this important forum. I'm greatly appreciative. So before we get started, again, I'll just go ahead and share my screen so that you all can see this brief 6-minute video.
Depression is a strange friend. It can sometimes feel like your only companion. It's the dog you try to put in the backyard when company comes over. Depression is LeBron James' hairline. It leaves and it comes back and it leaves, somehow comes back. Depression is a police officer's gun. Doesn't always need a good reason to trigger. Sometimes it just triggers, even in your own home. Depression is a Beyonce album. We don't know when it's gonna come, but we anticipate all the pandemonium it streams. Depression is a Beyonce concert. All the voices around you can be deafening. It is being around all your favorite people, doing all your favorite things, and still finding life to be despairing. It is gray paint on rainbows. Depression is waking up stuck in your bed that feels a lot more like casket, hoping to find God in the ceilings. Depression is the creepy man catcalling at her in the alley. It shouldn't be normal, but it is. Pastor, do not be offended if I go see a professional. It doesn't mean I don't think you can do your job. It just means I think she can do her job too. Like, we think professional help is cool for diabetes and pills for high blood pressure, but mental illness can only be treated with exorcism. Depression is repeating to yourself, I want to live. I want to live. I want to live. And hoping you'll believe yourself on the 12th time. On Thursday, I dragged me and all my voices to my therapist's office. I told her I don't think I'm suicidal. I just don't want to live anymore. Breathing can become so redundant after a while. My 21st birthday fell on a Sunday. I sat under voices of a choir floating over me like stars. I was a vast emptiness, surprised I was still living. I always knew I would die young. I heard of suicides in the news, and I wanted to be sad for them. I was jealous. Maybe they wanted it more than I did. The day Kate Spade hung herself, for a moment, I thought she was a hero, a damsel in distress that came to her own rescue. People thought she gave up on life, but on Thursday, I thought she was a renegade, a rogue soldier that finally protested all the ghosts screaming at her at night. I saw a magician, the way she made the black disappear, transformed her thoughts into doves. I saw a designer, the way she made her mind all pretty and calm again. Interior decorated the room with her swinging body as the centerpiece. Maybe in that moment, she never felt more in control of her life. In her life, depression is to be space, to be so grand but still so empty and dark, to be island, surrounded all of ocean and still thirst to be privileged, affording the luxury to think about your depression, to be distant, to feel like God's afterthought, to feel broken and pierced, suspended above a hill alone. Depression sounds a lot like Jesus. No, it sounds negligent to speak of him this way. It's always sounded blasphemous to those who wanted him to be so God, but not so human. Depression is being betrayed by friends, questioned by family, mocked and beaten by enemies. It is showing up last to Lazarus' deathbed, seeing his sisters mourn. It is being so aware of how grim life really is that you sweat blood. It is being in your father's counseling office in Gethsemane's garden, only to be left naked and forsaken on wooden sticks, the true vine crushed and destined out to dry on a cross and ferment in a grave. You think you didn't know what it was like to be depressed, to be stricken with grief? A man quite fond of sorrows learned his obedience through suffering, became a curse like depression on a cross for us. Sometimes telling us just to be happy is a mocking dismissal. But our Savior friend, he listens, weeps, he says, I know. I know what it is like to be sorrowed unto death and still fight for joy. We do not have a Redeemer unable to sympathize with our temptations, but one who was tempted in every way, yet without falling, yet without losing grip of you. You are not alone in the spaces of your darkness. When your bed feels a lot more like casket, there is still hope to resurrect, to new mercies at morning. For all the confused, God is certain. For all the unstable in mind, Christ is steadfast. And one day we will laugh about sorrow and death like it was an old inside joke among friends. Because depression may have my mind sometimes, but it is too weak to carry my soul. Despondency will never know eternity. Death will never know my spirit. Depression is now, y'all. It is now forever.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Every time you
Okay.
walk through these doors, you're taking steps to.
Okay. So I hope you all enjoyed that brief video. I just thought it was a beautiful spoken word piece that kind of just sheds light on what it may be like to deal with a mental illness. So welcome again, everyone. I thank you all for joining. And I'm extremely grateful for our panelists today for agreeing to just, speak to their passions and their experience with mental health. So before we get started, my name is Nafisah. I have, I want to say, about 5 years of just mental health advocacy. I'm currently in my last year of graduate school, working to get my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And in my own experience, just from doing research in school, but also just seeing friends who were really struggling and didn't really have the resources on how to cope with everything that's going on in the world, especially now with police brutality and the pandemic and everything that we're dealing with in our own personal lives. I really felt that it was essential to have an open discussion to try to break down some of the stigma surrounding mental health in the Black community and in the community of people of color. So, again, I thank everyone for joining today. We have a lot of excellent discussion questions, and I know that you all have questions as well. So, feel free towards the end to put your questions in the chat. But at this point, I would like to introduce our panelists. This is something that we were hoping to do in person in May in my hometown of Roselle, New Jersey. But again, due to the pandemic, we decided to do a virtual format on today, which is World Mental Health Day. So I'm very excited and looking forward to hearing from our panelists. So I will go ahead and do a brief introduction, they will go ahead and introduce themselves a little bit more. But just to start off, first we have Dr. Monique Swift, who owns Swift Solutions Consultant Services, LLC. She is a psychologist, a New Jersey licensed professional counselor, and a New York licensed mental health counselor. She has over 20 years of experience in the field of mental health and operates a private practice in Rahway, New Jersey, where she specializes in couples therapy and trauma. Thank you, Dr. Swift, for joining us today. It is a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it is a pleasure to be here, Nafisah. Thank you for having the wisdom to create this forum and to highlight such a critical topic, especially in this hour. You know, they say everything happens for a reason. It was supposed to be in May, but it feels so fitting right now, today, given where we are in our world. So thank you for that. And I think I'm supposed to be introducing myself.
Yes, if you could just tell us a little bit more about your work.
Okay, so I have a private practice, pretty small private practice in Rahway, New Jersey. A psychologist. I do a lot of consulting work and a lot of volunteer work. Much of my volunteer work is through the Association of Black Psychologists, where I am currently sitting as president of that organization. And we're very active in the community. I secondarily, well, since COVID, it hasn't been that much, but tend to do, volunteer work through the Nation of Islam and my activity there as one of the members of that organization. And so I do a lot outside of my practice in that field. My consulting work um, tends to revolve most exclusively around trauma. My expertise is in trauma, and I do a lot of work with regard to helping to educate people about trauma and helping organizations and systems to become trauma informed. Most specifically, I'm real proud of a program that I helped to start that's happening in Newark, New Jersey, which is a police community trauma program. We bring police officers and community members together in the same room and help to create mutual understanding. And we talk about, what's going on both sides. And we use a trauma-informed lens to make that happen. And so it is, to say the least, it is very transformative in many respects. And so that, I don't want to take up too much time, but that's kind of a thumbnail of what I do.
Thank you. Again, I definitely appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Jared Washington. Jared is a licensed professional counselor and has received his Master's of Art in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. He received his bachelor's from Ramapo College of New Jersey in psychology with a minor in African American Studies. Jared has over 9 years of experience in the mental health field and has worked in various clinical environments such as psychiatric hospitals, insurance providers, and foster care agencies. Welcome, Jared. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Definitely honored to be here, share this platform with you. I think it's amazing to see how you have grown. I remember you when you were like I don't know, you wasn't a baby, but you was a kid though. But it's just you have grown, putting this together is great. Definitely wish we could have did it in the hometown of Roselle. But just a little bit more about me. I too also have a small private practice called HOPE, stands for Healing, Outreach, Purpose, and Empowerment. Also worked for an insurance company as a utilization manager. And I'll primarily focus on intergenerational trauma. If anybody have seen any of some of the work I've done, I focus heavily on that, especially as it relates to the African American community in America. I think it's thoroughly important, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna end up talking about it today because I always loop around to it. But I just think it's really important to get to spread awareness so that our community is aware of what that is and how it's maintained by racial trauma or race-based traumatic stress, and how that impacts how we live, how we operate, just how we just go about life, how we cope with life, and how we cope with things in America. So that's just a little bit more about me. And again, I'm excited to be here and excited to answer some questions.
Thank you. And next we have Parentep, who has a master's in clinical psychology and has been with the Mental Health Association of New Jersey for 12 years, helping countless families, including mine, navigate the mental health system. And he works for the intensive support family services, correct? Just wanted to make sure I was saying it right. So welcome, Parentep. And I know that he does a lot more, so I'll allow you to just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
First of all, it's a privilege to be with all of you. And I'm so glad you took initiative. It's like, there are so many things happening in society that bother us. And then when somebody likes you take an initiative, you feel like a weight has been lifted off your shoulder because we collectively carry this burden, the burden of the mentally ill in our community, our society. To throw quick figures, then I'll tell a little bit about myself. In 1955, the demographics of New Jersey were such that the number of mentally ill were 55,000. Right now, 220, the demographic, we have a much bigger population. So you can imagine, serious and persistent mentally ill are 100,000 plus. These are our neighbors, these are our children, these are our friends, family, all around us. In 1955, the state hospitals and asylums had a capacity of having everyone live in the asylum. So they had capacity of 55,000 in Greystone Park and Marlborough, and these were Trenton State Psychiatric Hospital. Right now, funding has been cut. The new program is community-based rehabilitation, reintegration, all that. And the capacity of the hospitals has been decreased to like 600, 700. So more people are out in the community. More people are living with families, 60 to 40% live with families. And my work is educating these families how to cope with the loved one who's living with them. Because family and the consumer is like the yin and yang. You can't help the consumer if you don't support, educate, empower, and give skills and tools to the family and help them navigate the system and help them advocate for better quality of care. So that's what I live, I breathe. I have a part-time position as a psychiatric screener at Trinitas Hospital. And I train police officers in Union County. I try my best to convince them that there is a thin line between you and the family and the consumer you are serving. It could have been you. It could have been your son. Think about it. And then treat them that way, how you would like to be treated kindly. And I have found many receptive to it. Here in Mental Health Association, my work is primarily in crisis intervention with families. So from the onset of an illness, family calls me and I help them walk all the way from, say, therapy, intervention, hospitalization, outpatient treatment, discharge, to rehabilitation and get a proper quality of life. I see a lot of good things happen over the years. That's why I've stayed with one place. And that's what keeps bringing me back to work. I mean, you are one of the reasons. I've seen you 10 years ago and look at you now, blossomed and giving something to the community. So very proud of you. I have a small private practice also in my free time because this is all I do. It's called Family Problems Solutions. It's information is on the website, but I do life coaching with families who have a loved one with mental illness. So the goal is to help people create a balance that they can take care of themselves, their loved one, get services. And the rest is, there is a lot of hurt and pain in the world. Try my best not to add to it.
Thank you. Definitely a pleasure to have you. And last but not least, we have Renee Mohammed, who has her master's in accounting and taxation. That is her background, but she has been a mental health advocate for the past 15 years, supporting mental health awareness walks and even writing letters to officials to provide adequate services on behalf of her son. So please welcome Renee Mohammed.
Thank you, Nafisah, for having me. Thank you for writing that nice bio. You could have asked me for a bio. But I'm just humbled and honored to be in this august assembly of professionals who are passionate and so helpful to an underserved community. The more um, the more I'm into it, the more I realize how underserved it is. And Parentech and Intensive Family Support Services has been absolutely indispensable for me and my entire family. Um, I was completely uneducated when my son was diagnosed. And so I went about everything absolutely the wrong way, saying things and doing things that was not helping the situation, which, by the way, he was diagnosed um, 12 years ago or so, I think, um, with schizophrenia. And so um, it's been heaven and hell, if that's a good description. It's been ups and downs. It's been heartaches and joy. It's been a complete roller coaster ride. And Intensive Family Support Services, my believing community family, and my own family have been just my complete support system to help us all get through this. So I'm just happy to be here, and I pray that this can help, even if just one family. I pray this forum can help other families get through this type of situation.
Thank you. Grateful to have you as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first question is open to everyone. And the question is, what led to your interest in mental health?
Well, I could start.
Okay.
My interest started with my son being diagnosed. You know, like parents have said, you never know how or when it could hit someone you love. You know, so you know, I think I can use this as a good example. Prior to my son being diagnosed, you know, you see mentally ill people on the street, and you kind of just shake your head and, you know, pray for them or whatever, give them a couple of dollars or whatever. But once it hits your family, you have a whole new perspective, and you see them, and you see, you know, now when I see not just the homeless, but clearly people who have a mental illness, they're having audible hallucinations or whatever. And it's just a whole new thing. It's like, you know, does this person have family? I wonder if he knows about this organization. And, you know, all of these different thoughts come now. It's just a whole different ball game when it hits your family. So, and it's so many dynamics to it. Trauma, or, you know, past trauma, or um, injury, or whatever the case could be. It's so many dynamics to mental illness now. I've just come into so much knowledge and information. But that is what led me to be try to be more educated about it, and also try to advocate a little bit more, not just for my son, but for, you know, others who may not have resources or know what to do.
Thank you.
I'll go next. What got me interested in mental health, it's kind of was an interesting journey for me per se, but to conceptualize it all, I was pushed here spiritually, I believe. I feel like, you know, I always knew that I wanted to help people in some capacity, but I didn't know what capacity that was, right? I didn't know what that looked like. I thought it might have been teaching, and even went that route for a little bit. And, but things kind of didn't work out in my favor, and was looking to move to Atlanta. I didn't mention I actually live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm from Roselle, New Jersey, but I live in Atlanta. But I ended up working at a psych hospital, and was just extremely intrigued by what I was seeing. A psych hospital, you are pretty much introduced to everything when it comes to mental health, right? You're seeing pretty much all of the mental health illnesses out there. You're seeing it being treated from a medical perspective or a medicine-based perspective. Um, and it was just interesting to watch people go from one place on their mental health journey to the next, or one level to the next level. And that just really piqued my interest. And even after even after that, I still kind of was like pushing back on it. I was like, yeah, I want to do counseling, but I'm not sure if I want to be like a therapist. I just want to be in mental health. And but I feel like God just kept saying, no, 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 no. Just hold up. This is what you're here for. This is your purpose. This is mental health is what you're passionate about. So this is the route that you're going to go down. And so, I ended up getting a master's. Even then, I still was pushing back. I don't want to be a therapist. I can't imagine myself sitting in a room all day just talking, and but it just everything comes full circle. Here I am, and I love what I do. And I just love seeing people heal. So and even being a part of that process. So that's really what sparked my interest. Just some of the experiences I had, and just being spiritually pushed to enter into this field. So
Thank you.
I some of what Jared said kind of resonates for me also. I kind of also started out just kind of with a feeling I wanted to help people. I didn't know what that looked like, and what avenue to take toward that. And I also wanted to teach. So from school, I was going into teaching, and I was, as I'm on that route, I began substitute teaching. And I would substitute while I was still in school as an undergrad in New Brunswick, and I also substituted in Newark at Shabazz. Anybody out there from Shabazz? Interesting experiences there. But as I'm substitute teaching, I'm finding myself inclining toward, the person of the student. Not just that this is a student here and I'm supposed to convey information to the student, but that, that student's been real quiet. I wonder what's going on. So-and-so is acting a certain way. I wonder what's going on. And my mind would go in that direction. And it was through that experience and pulling those students close and saying, hey, what's happening? Hey, I see you doing this today. And in that, I realized what I wanted to do. And then my next, really my first real job, I was a substance abuse prevention and intervention specialist in the New York public school system. And that was an interesting combination of, I would teach as well as do counseling. And I just loved the counseling. I loved it. I knew at that point I could just sit all day and have one person after the next just come in and we just jam. And so that was kind of the beginning. And the rest was, how can I figure out how to get to that point? How can I figure out how to get to a point where I can sit somewhere and people just kind of come to me and we talk. and the rest is history.
Thank you.
My story is a little different. I had no clue what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an actor when I was in 10th grade and didn't have any kind of worry in life. And suddenly my parents had a fallout and both of them had issues. If like now me and my sister joke that if there are awards given for certain kind of personality disorders, mom would win or dad would win, that kind. How you make fun of things to cope. So that's the time when I was worried about myself. Will I grow up to be okay and normal? Because I felt my family was different than others. When there is dysfunction in the family, the world makes you realize it. When you walk down a street and your neighbors look at you because they overheard your parents shouting at each other, you feel their thoughts, you hear their thoughts, and you feel ashamed for no reason. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started worrying about myself. So I sought help of a teacher who was a master's in psychology, and I liked how she spoke to me. So somewhere I felt, this is the direction in which I need to go, because the small town in India where I come from, there is for mental illness, these are the resources: astrologer, palmist, parrot who picks up a card and hands you, psychics, priest, but no therapist. There are psychiatrists, but these are totally medical model who don't even know how to listen and talk, and they give you random medications that make you feel like something wrong with you. So I decided to learn psychology so I can help myself, so that I figure it out and I'm okay. When I entered into that field, I saw so much opportunity for self-growth. And I felt somewhere that I am able to develop insight into why do I do what I do, and what do I really want, and how do I make it happen. So throughout from 17, 18 years old up until last few years ago, I have been in and out of therapy. Like I can like talk about, don't go to this one, go to that one. Yeah, that one's nice. I've kind of tried them all. And it's because I'm so dynamic by nature that if I'm stuck, I will figure out a way to get unstuck. I will not stay stuck. And I saw it as a gift. And I can only thank the first therapist I met. I said, is there something wrong with me? I feel I need help and I need someone to talk to. And he said, that's a sign of somebody who has good insight. It's a good thing that you want to get over it. You're seeking help. That's good. So that led me to in future getting help. And as I benefited, it kind of comes around, goes around, you want to give something back. So then this became like my passion, my vocation. And then as I grew a little more older and mature, it's like, I've been driving in New Jersey my whole life. And trust me, New Jersey drivers are better than the drivers in India. And when my daughter was born, suddenly I felt, is he crazy? Oh my God, are these madmen? How come you're driving like this? You suddenly become more sensitive to the world because you have a child. So as I was growing up, I became more sensitive and I realized that there is a lot of work needed to be done in this area to heal. And I like connecting with people at an intimate level. I cannot work 8 hours in a bank or in any field where you talk about everything other than you and me. And therapy allowed me that intimacy. I like to be close. I like to cry. I like to support people in crying. And I like us to part feeling something happened here and feel moved and touched by each other. That need of mine was met, and to be able to contribute to somebody's benefit. And then many times it comes back to me. It's like when I started working in this field, helping families with mental illness, I worked with all my heart. Then my own daughter got sick. And trust me, I was the king of coping mechanisms. I was like the king of motivational speeches. I can fire anybody up. When it came to me, I was down. I just couldn't come up. And that's when I sought out help from your mom, Renee. She gave me a little pep talk. I spoke to a few other family members and it came back to me. And I kind of got recreated again. So now this has become like my life. And I found my calling, so to speak. And it is started out with psychotherapy, fancy therapy, using jargon and words. Now it is more towards healing, community healing, and social justice. And I mean, I don't, if I can get a degree in a certain kind of a therapy, I would not feel as good if I can contribute to social justice and real social reform. I'm talking at a policy level, from schools to police to community level, and just see that we treat each other a little better. I mean, from top down, there is a new trend of being apathetic and being just mean-spirited and being hurtful for no reason and being very selfish. And it's getting worse with the way society is going. So if I can make it contribute to go clockwise from how much anti-clockwise is going, I will feel like I have lived a meaningful life. So here I am.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Nice.
Now, really, the purpose of the forum is to try to break up some of the stigma surrounding mental health in the Black community and communities of color. So, my next question is open to everyone, and it's really just, why do you think there is so much stigma surrounding mental health, particularly in these communities?
Um, if I may, I'll jump in. This stigma or taboo, I think has deep roots. I don't think it's something just kind of a modern phenomenon of what we see. It's something that really does have deep roots that I think for Black people stems back to slavery. For 300 years, we, were in pain, physical pain, emotional pain, social pain, right? And through all of that, we had to suck up and keep going. And our lives depended on that. There was never space, there was never room for us to heal, for us to even pay attention to our pain, our hurt. We had to keep going. And I think part of what we're seeing today is kind of a vestige of that we are just have this sort of aversion to stopping and paying attention to hurt and pain and moving on. I think also another side of that is also connecting to our historical experience here in America, because it has been historically true that the more white people know about us, the more disadvantaged we may be. So what do I mean by that? So for example, if I have applied for financial assistance and then meet somebody and get married, well, when that worker comes in and finds out that I'm married, then what happens? I get cut off, right? Or if I go and tell my teacher that, my mom wasn't home last night, or she works evenings, now DIFUS is at your door. And so historically too, for good reason, we've been a people, what happens in this house stays in this house. Don't you go out here telling anybody anything, because it's gonna come back and bite you in the butt. People don't say that part, but that's kind of embedded in the message. And so I think all of that is wrapped up into all of these like narratives and messages. Just keep it to yourself, keep moving, act like it's not there, keep moving. It lends to this, what we're calling a taboo or this stigma.
Thank you for that insight. Would anyone else like to add?
Yeah, I think to I think to add to that, man, Dr. Swift, you got me riled up. um, I think to add to that is we don't take, and when I say we, I'm really just talking about society. I'm not really talking about particularly just African Americans in the Black community, but we don't. They say that there's a taboo, or they say there's a stigma when it comes to mental health in the Black community, right? And even when you're going through your journey or going through school, they even mention it for the Black community. They're like, yeah, African Americans typically don't really come to therapy like that, and when they do, you have to this and act like that and whatever, whatever. But they never talk about the reasons, right? They never talk about the mistrust or the distrust of institutions. And when you think about mental health, the mental health field is still a part of that institution, right? And so they don't talk about how you have situations or experiences such as like Tuskegee. They don't talk about how you have Marion J. Sims, who practiced on black slaves, black female slaves, on women slaves, and is coined the father of gynecology. They don't talk type of stuff. So they don't talk about the distrust of the institutions as to being a factor into why Black people or African Americans don't go to therapy. We don't trust it. Where is my information? What are you going to do with this, right? What happens next? How do I trust that I'm going to tell you some of my deepest and darkest secrets, and you're not going to use that against me? You know what I'm saying? And so they don't talk about that type of stuff. And when it comes to learning that there's a taboo or a stigma. But I also think that I agree with Dr. Swift. It is the history. It's the history, and we never was given that time to heal, but in fact was always put in survivor mode, right? Where we have to survive. And we teach that to our children. I told you intergenerational trauma was going to come in at some point in time in this conversation. Here it goes, right? This intergenerational trauma. right? We're teaching our children, or trauma responses are being passed down through the different generations in our families and in our communities without any true time to heal from it, right? And also, I believe that some of these trauma responses are also being coined or also being labeled as culture. You get what I'm saying? And so I think that we have to take all of that into account, and we also have to take into account that vulnerability is discouraged in our community.
Mm.
You know, it just imagine Nafisah and Sister Renee and Roselle. Just imagine me and Rodell walking down the street talking and we crying in front of our friends. Our friends would look at us like we were crazy. They would be like, "What is wrong with you? Why are you crying? You are a boy. Like you don't cry. Boys don't cry." You know what I'm saying? So I think we have to take all of those into account when we talk about the taboo or the stigma. And there's more, right? I'm just trying to be very limited. I'm trying to take over this whole conversation, but those are some of the factors that we have to take into account, that we have to think about when we're talking about the taboo or the stigma when it comes to African Americans or Black people in this country going to therapy. And we just have to continue doing this work so that we can break those stigmas down, so that we can get young, old, middle brothers and sisters into therapy, so that we can heal our communities. Because we were never given that place to heal. Never. Slavery ended, and all it was more trauma. Still to this day. Just more trauma. No place to heal. So
I will share with you my perspective as an outsider, though I have lived in the US 30 years. America is a country of survival of the fittest. If you are not vulnerable and you are aggressive and you are a fighter and you can dominate and you can push back, you're fine. If you are mentally ill, if you are physically disabled, if you are having developmental disability issues, anything, it's a weakness. And it's a weakness that makes you more vulnerable to be hurt, makes you a victim. So we downplay anything that is a weakness because we want to protect ourselves. It's a defense mechanism to overcompensate and make yourself look invincible. And I'm fine. I mean, the president just came out of a hospital and he's like, he beat COVID. Like it's some kind of a sport. Like I bench press 200. So we are at a phase of evolution in society where anything that we don't know, we are afraid of. Years ago, LGBTQs were treated so badly, so poorly. Even now, transgenders are. And sensitivity and compassion and understanding and learning is getting better. And they are being given a much better platform and understanding. But people, African American, who's like Michael Che and somebody else did a stand-up comedy clip. He said the homosexual Caucasian is asking for equal rights. And he said, look at us Black people. We're just saying Black lives matter. That's all. We're not asking for much. So, I mean, we have a long way to go. I mean, we have come forward, but there is a certain amount of inability to be vulnerable, to give room and space for our imperfections, because we have to look so good and so perfect, because we are always so threatened. We always have to put our best foot forward, or else somebody will take advantage of me or my family. And it deprives people, this mask that we wear of well-being when we are not, it deprives us of seeking help and people coming and helping us. And everybody kind of lives in their own isolation and hurt and pain and suffers in silence. But when we take the mask off, 1 out of 4 has mental illness. Every family member has 1 or 2 people who they call is a little off, but that's mental illness in one way or the other. And if people can just lean on to each other and listen to each other, we feel so normal. Every time I've been in a support group, and I feel like I'm the first one to talking about how messed up my reality is. And then 6 people tell me, I've been there, I know that, I know how it feels, it can be fixed this way, that way. I come back feeling there is hope, optimism, and there are people out there like me. So that means I'm not the only one, but that requires us to dialogue. And the way you have started and initiating this conversation, this is the way we can bust stigma, because we are all hurting one way or the other. So the more we listen and talk, the less we hurt. We share the burden.
If I could just add from the perspective of a Black female also, and it ties in really with what all of the panelists have said so far. I think I can best describe it as I spent a great deal of my young life with my grandmother, who bore 12 children and raised them all somehow, and whose either mother or grandmother was a slave, and who just was the rock of our entire family. And then she even reared grandchildren and some great grandchildren. So I had this woman before me who I never saw cry. I never even so much as heard complain. She just kept it moving every single day. She got up at a certain time, no alarm clock. She went to bed at a certain time. Now, all of this when I was young, I didn't really perceive. But as I got older, and even more so after she passed away, I started to reflect on everything she did. And I started thinking to myself, first I just thought she was a superwoman and that was it. But eventually I came to realize that I'm sure she had some trauma and some pain, but she just, like Dr. Monique was saying, she just had to keep it moving. You know, she had things to do. She had a house to run. She had a garden to tend to. She had mouths to feed, you know. And then I remember vividly going out with her to certain houses in our neighborhood and delivering plates of food to older women who couldn't get out. I remember one woman only had one leg. I remember another woman was just sick. And these were just women and my grandmother had a limp. You know, she wasn't the most physically fit. You could tell her body had seen a lot, you know, I guess so, 12 children. And we would walk around to these different houses and deliver this food. And I remember being out in the garden planting stuff and her bending over for hours, picking stuff or either planting stuff. So all of this came to me then, but she didn't complain. She didn't, you know, she never cried. I watched her bury 3 of her children, maybe even 4, not a tear in her eye. I watched her at each of these funerals. So even my daughter can testify. I came up when I had my own children with this motto, you know, whatever's going on, build a bridge and get over it. My daughter has heard me say that often. Build a bridge and get over it. We got stuff to do. Let's go. Stop. But I had to stop, of course. And especially coming into the part of my life with my son being mentally ill. And so now I have learned, I don't want this to be generational. And so now, Nafisah may or may not know this, but now I openly talk with her about my anxiety because I want her to know it's okay. It's not, you're not any less of a woman if you are off this day or that day or a few days, and you're not any less of a woman if you have anxiety or you're dealing with something or whatever. The world we live in today, I can't imagine anyone not having some form, slight or whatever, of mental illness, and it doesn't, or mental health challenge. It doesn't have to be an illness. But so, and from the perspective of Black women, we've carried a lot historically, even back to what Jared and Sister Monique were talking about. During slavery, we had to watch, you know, Black men be broken and not say anything for fear of the child being sold off. And so we just learned to carry these things and carry these things and carry these things and carry these things. But the mental health asylums started getting filled up, you know, and as you learn more, I started learning more about the women, the Black women who ended up in asylums just because they unfortunately didn't have an avenue and no resources and nothing, no recourse to talk or heal or anything, and just snapped. And so, you know, that's something that is also another factor. And I think that is so wonderful that so many people are opening up about this issue now, and celebrities are using their platforms to highlight mental health and mental illness. So I just wanted to add that from the perspective of a Black female.
Mhm.
Thank you. This is great, like the different perspectives that are coming in here. And I just want to take off a little more too from the last point that you mentioned, Sister Renee. Um, in, in looking at the history of this field of mental health, you know, we when we talk about stigma, often we're kind of stigmatizing when we talk about stigma, in the sense that it's something that we're doing wrong. We point our fingers at each other like we're doing something wrong. And so I just want to kind of expand that a little bit more to recognize that this is systemic as well. That if you look at the history of therapy, it was a rich white person's, rich white man's thing from the beginning. It wasn't for everybody. And then it kind of became more a white woman's thing. They didn't market therapy to Black people for many years. We weren't thought about, we weren't cared about. There's a dearth of literature related to issues pertaining to Black people or how to approach Black people in therapy. An extreme dearth of information there. And so we have to hold this system accountable as well for this stigma that we're talking about, that we're putting on ourselves. So I just kind of wanted to make that point, that today I would be remiss in not mentioning that while there's been this historical stigma, it does feel like today it's being broken through to a great degree. Like Sister Renee said, a lot of celebrities are using their platform, they're starting foundations, or mental health, particularly aimed at Black people, is expanding tremendously. And I do see, and I get calls constantly, and I have to turn people away constantly because Black people want to be seen, which leads kind of to another issue. There's not many people that they want to see. Now, I don't want to jump ahead. That might be a conversation, but I just want to throw that out.
No, I definitely appreciate that. There's so much that's coming up. And like, honestly, I'm like, okay, which direction do I want to go in next? Because you all have hit different points that I've wanted to talk about. But I think what Dr. Swift just said is very key, because I think that we have to also be mindful of the language that we use. Because even viewing therapy, like you said, you know, almost like it's something wrong. Something must be wrong with you if you're going out to seek treatment. And that's not necessarily the case. It's not the case. So I appreciate that, all of your viewpoints so far. I did want to touch on just what we think that we can do to try to reduce some of the stigma. And Sister Monique, if you could actually just speak to, in your experience, what has your experience been with the lack of participation from Black clients?
So as I was saying, in this last decade, we want to be seen. We want help. I would say, you know, there has been a period of, lacking health care, not having health care, so we can't really afford to pay for it. Lacking that access has been an issue, but by and large now, we kind of have the health care. Many of us have the money to pay out of pocket if we want to pay out of pocket as well. And we are trying to seek help. The problem now is not trying to get people into care, it's trying to get adequate care for the people who need and want it. And that leads us down another rabbit trail of issues because we're Black. And what do I mean by that? I mean, why is it that the psychologists specifically, nationwide, Black psychologists are 4%. 4% of the psychologists in this nation are Black. And I'm not sure what the other, counselors and so forth is, but I'm sure it mirrors that. But so we have to ask the question, well, why is that? How could that be? And in order to answer that question, we have to look at, well, what are the programs that what is happening in that pipeline? And so in the schools, what's happening in the schools? Well, if you look at the schools, students, the difference, the variation between the students that apply, get in, and the students that graduate, there's disparity there. So a lot of Black students are getting in school, but they're not graduating. So then you have to ask, well, what's happening? Why are they not graduating, right? If you see what I'm saying, you keep having to trail this thing back, and you'll see a whole a whole constellation of issues due to systemic oppression and racism.
Yeah, and also if I can add to it, that stigma is the first problem we are dealing with. But if we overcome stigma and a person wants to seek help, then there are barriers to treatment. And what do I mean by barriers? Is any minority person, if they seek help in minority and say neighborhoods like Elizabeth or Plainfield, you go to a place which is called a community mental health center. These places are like a warehouse where people with Medicaid go because it has the lowest reimbursement rate. And it is a medical model, which is basically hijack of psychological treatment by the pharmaceutical industry, that everything, there is a pill for everything. If somebody died in your family, 6 weeks later, if you're still crying, you need a happy pill, antidepressant. And somewhere people who really want to talk, they go there like, I'm not getting my needs met, so they drop out. So they are considered, oh, these are high risk for dropouts. It's like blaming the victim, so to speak. And same people, when they go to private therapists who are not culturally sensitive and adequately trained, and I'm not talking pretending to be culturally sensitive. Right. I'm not talking like the act put up. I'm talking really seeing two people as human beings and connecting at that level. What they end up doing is they make minorities feel so different. Either they make them too exotic or they pathologize them, but it's like they kind of don't hit the right notes and they don't generate the right conversation. So people end up dropping out. So there should be a push at American Psychological Association, Counseling, Social Work Association, all these great bodies. They need to start telling schools and colleges from the get-go. They start grooming the good students who are undergrads to apply for grad school. And those who are in grad school, help them, support them. Maybe somebody has something going on in their life that they cannot do everything at the same time, but help them get through. Because I read one study where culturally familiar therapists were not available, that community, people were not seeking therapy. When they hired familiar faces and familiar people of the same culture, people were like breaking the door. They were like 30 to 40% spike within a month. Because people want people like them who understand them and get them. So I think this is where advocacy comes in, that the bodies that are overseeing how many people go into the PsyD program in colleges and get LCSW and all those things, is to question them. Why is it that 24%, if I'm not wrong, of clientele in psychiatric hospitals is African American, and the providers of services is hardly 2%. Why? And how can we fix it? Because unless we address this, the retention of people in therapy is less, and then the relapses increase, and we keep going through the cycle of generations. So,
right. Thank you. I actually want to, yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You had something you wanted to
Because
add?
I think this might lead into another conversation, but so many parents have made me think of so many things in my experiences with the mental health system, and he has really helped me, has had to help me to navigate it. I think that everything he said and Dr. Monique said is even tenfold when you have serious mental illness like schizophrenia. So the mental health system is just overwhelmed. We have been through so many programs, groups, programs. Parents can help me remember IOC, the neighborhood house in Elizabeth, just so many over the years, and they're overwhelmed. They no, I don't think anybody on a legislative level has taken a serious shot at helping the mentally ill. at doing anything in the mental health system. It's just in my experience, it's just been medicine management. There has hardly ever been an offer of therapy, which I believe it would have helped a long time ago, and maybe it could still help. But had it been available a long time ago, and especially when it's just Medicaid available, once my son was off our um, our medical plan, it was just Medicaid left, and it's just a cycle. It's almost like it's like a dot the I thing. First, you get them on Social Security, you get them on food stamps, you get them into a program where someone can come give them their medicine every day. This person who comes, checks it off, has them sign, which is a whole nother problem, to have seriously mentally ill schizophrenic sign something, and that be okay. Sign that you received your help for today. And then I'm off to the next person. And I don't blame these people who have gotten into this field to try to help. They're just overwhelmed. The people who will come and see Rydell have 10 or 15 people to see. They got to hurry up and get the signatures. And they know this one might not be there for long because he might run off. So, I got to hurry up and get Rydell to sign and let me run over and get to this person. And it's just, that really is the dismal picture of mental health. And I'm sure it's worse, in other places or just as bad. Unless you have good insurance, unfortunately, and you have to have insurance in this country. Third world nations can offer this for free, but unless you have good insurance, you're not going to get, the full spectrum of the services that you really truly need. Some of these I found some really, really good centers that look like they may be able to help, but they require really good insurance or really, really deep pockets. None of which the majority of the people who need it, are in either of those categories. So I just wanted to add that it's just very, very sad, the state of mental health in this country, and to listen to people, in these sessions on Capitol Hill or whatever, address these people. I watched that segment with Dr. Jaffe Parentep, where they were able to address President Trump and his whole mental health team. They could care less. It was a joke. The people who addressed them were serious and wanted to, gave beautiful presentations of the issues and challenges that the mentally ill face. But, unfortunately, that's as far as it goes. No one wants to say, here, let me get the fact that hospital beds, the fact that patients, consumers outnumber hospital beds almost 50-1 and it could even be 100-1 now. I think it is. It's even maybe 1,000-1 because there's only 500 or 600 beds, and we got hundreds of thousands of consumers. So that alone, and the fact that just within I think it's been within the last 10 years, the amount of hospitals that met these needs before that have closed down. Governments around this country are saying, we don't want this headache. We don't need to have these state-run hospitals open. Let the community take care of them. And here we are. So I just wanted to add that, that it's people who care, like you all, who, are making a small dent in this very, very, and I hate to sound so, I hate to make it sound so blight and glum, but it is sad. It's really sad. Parentep is a screener at Trinitas. He can tell you how many people come in. And even the questions they ask, if you're not a person who really cares, they'll screen you. My son's been screened where it's like, no, he doesn't sound like he's going to kill himself, so he can go, and yeah, he doesn't sound like that now, but I see, if I see something, why don't you believe me that I'm telling you something's off? And it's because sometimes it's not the screener's fault. Sometimes it's the screener knowing that they don't have space. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, so the interesting part is that you decrease the beds. So now you have a very small resource, and a lot of people are fighting for it. So everybody gets like that 2 days, 3 days, a little bit, and they keep going around in circles. But I'll tell you how the big picture, and I learned this by working for the Mental Health Association, is that it's so easy to get caught into what happens on the front line. But what are the overriding principles? Is that a OBGYN would need liability insurance that can go easily up to 200,000 to do practice in New Jersey. A cardiac surgeon would have to get liability insurance annually. That would cost like 100,000 or something. Everything is like very expensive when it comes to these kind of dentists and all of them. A psychiatrist gets a liability insurance for between 3,000 to 8,000 for the whole year. So imagine, where is the pressure for the psychiatrist to like sort of dot their I's and cross their T's and notify a family that I think your son is not taking medicine, please keep an eye on him, here's the crisis number. No, because we don't sue. And I'm not saying that let's all have what you call the class action lawsuits left and right. But I really think that when the system is held accountable, either by advocates pushing for change or by landmark lawsuits like, you know, the Abbott school districts, how they were formed, you know, that kind of, only then things will change, because everybody is kind of looking at their little world and nobody's looking at a big picture when they see a client. That you see him in a snapshot of half an hour is not suicidal, homicidal, psychotic. Okay, you can go home. But look at the picture. What does the mom say? Does the person take meds? It's not today, he's going to come back tomorrow. So let's do something that will prevent the person from coming back tomorrow. That kind of a grooming and that kind of an expectation from staff members across the board does not exist. So long as you dot your I's and cross your T's and do paperwork, it's kind of reversed. If you did not document, it did not happen. But it also means that if you did document, it happened, right? So people can discharge anyone and document very flowery, kind of a beautiful assessment. And it doesn't mean anything because the person is still not treated right. So I'm coming back to collective consciousness, collective advocacy, everybody rallying together and asking for more from the elected officials and voting, because we need social change in this area. It's like, it's just not okay the way things are going.
I can real quick. I'll be
Yeah.
real quick. Because this conversation also, and thank you, Sister Renee. I'm glad that you went forward to say what you said, because it is so very relevant. Um, this conversation also points to research and science, in that uh, when I was kind of going through school and through my career as well, that population, the severe persistent mental ill population, is just kind of one that is just kind of written off. The science has not progressed in regard to understanding that population. And so the way we're taught, many of you, those here might have had the same experience. Oh, that's medication management. That's it. We put them on meds and we just hope they don't bother us. But we don't care. There's no care for that population of people. And when I talk about the science, I have read some really credible studies and resources that point to gluten, particularly associated with schizophrenia. And that when you take gluten out of the diet, it reduces schizophrenic appearance. And it seems to be very slow. And why are we not putting money and effort and time into looking what, maybe there's some, dietary, the poisons that go in our foods, maybe there is some association there. We've just kind of written it off, and it seems like the period was put there and we haven't revisited using new techniques and new ways of understanding to revisit this population.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I gotta say something.
Nafisah.
I apologize.
Good.
But after hearing everybody speak, right? The question that Dr. Swift just said was, why aren't we putting money into this type of research? We live in a capitalist world. And at the end of the day, it's all about the dollar bill, right? Mm-hmm. We're not putting money into this because what happens to the individual that is that's suffering from schizophrenia, or the individual that deals with unspecified psychosis, right? Mm-hmm. What happens to them? Jail, mm-hmm. or mental health hospital. When you go to different, money. It's money. Jail, money. Mental health hospital, money. That's all. That's the bottom line. That's why I believe, anyway, let me speak for myself. I believe that's what it's about. And again, when Nafisah initially introduced me, she said, yeah, I worked in a psych hospital. I worked in the psych, and so I'm not sure how big of a difference Atlanta is or Georgia is in comparison to New Jersey. But I know me working in a psychiatric hospital in Atlanta, I remember having conversations, or I remember being in treatment teams, not even conversations. I remember being in treatment team meetings, and they have a paper, and they say the boss will say, all right, this person's insurance is not covering for the next couple of days, or this person's insurance is only covering for the day. What can we do to get them out of here? Or this insurance, this person is covered for 3 more days. What clinical do you have to keep them here? So I've been in meetings like that and discussed it, to say the least. Like, what? You know what I'm saying? So it's all about the money. And when we talked about the asylums shutting down, and what was that, the 50s or the 40s or 60s or something like that, where did all those people go? Jail, the streets. That's where they went. So that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. This country is not interested in actually healing people. Not at all. Not at all.
I definitely appreciate that and all of your input. We've talked a lot about some of the cases with a more severely ill population, but I did want to transition a little bit into some of the less severe mental health concerns that people have, because a lot of what I've heard amongst my friends is, you know, like I'm good, like, you know, I don't have schizophrenia, I don't have bipolar disorder, I don't have some of the, you know, some of these other disorders. So is therapy really necessary? That's where I'm going. Is therapy necessary if you don't have a quote unquote actual diagnosis? And anyone can kind of jump in on that.
I think so. I think therapy is necessary. I think first what we have to do is we have to educate people that there's a difference between mental health and mental illness, right? And so when we talk about therapy, you can be going to therapy because you're trying to treat a mental illness, right? Such as bipolar disorder, such as schizophrenia, such as depression, anxiety, all of that stuff, right? But you can also go to therapy to maintain your mental health, just so that we're healthy mentally, right? It's like I call it like a tune-up. You know, we go to the doctor, we go to your PCP once a year, right, for a tune-up, just to make sure everything's okay for your physical health. Doesn't mean that you have a physical illness, right? And so we can do the same for therapy. It doesn't necessarily have to be once a year. It could be once a month, right? Where we're just tuning it up, making sure that we're able to cope with the day-to-day stressors and stuff like that, you know? So I think, sorry, somebody just came to my house. But but I think that's what we have to distinguish, because people think that, again, like we stated earlier, that if we go to therapy, that means something's wrong with me. No, it doesn't mean that. And we're going to therapy because we want to maintain our mental stability, we want to maintain our mental health, or we want to treat our mental illness. And I think we have to distinguish the two. So to answer the question, yes, the therapy across the board. Sorry.
If I can add that, as society has become more modern, we have made therapy, counseling as a very fancy, but people have always helped people. It was just not called therapy. In rural communities all around the world, there was somebody, a village elder, elder brother, uncle, aunt, next door neighbor, somebody who overhears, hey, I heard you and your dad fighting. What is going on over there? And then they mentor, they coach, they talk. Somewhere, anybody who provides some counseling and help in healing is engaging in therapy. That's what it is. So it is not unique, it is not pathologizing, and it is how we all grow, because we have our own blind spots. Anything that we do, whether we are exercising, lifting weights, or we are performing on stage, we have somebody who tells us that, you know what, that angle doesn't look right, or you don't lift weights this way. We have blind spots. So same way how we conduct our business in life, it would help to have somebody take a look at what we are doing, because we would have our own defenses that block us from taking a critical look at ourselves, because we want to always look good and feel good and not kind of sort of uh, feel in any way small. But a therapist can look at it and say that, I see you're trying too hard here, and I see that you need to do this for yourself. And I think this is where your soul is, and this is where I hear your voice. And we all need some space where we feel vulnerable, where we can put down our guard and just say, this is who I am, and I'm hurting, and I don't know what to do. And if somebody can help us hold our hands and walk to on our journey, it can make a world of a difference. We all spend money and time on Amazon, Netflix, eating, drinking, traveling, so many things we do, which eventually we still have the same mind and we take it with us wherever we go. You can go to Vegas, but you're still taking your same mind with you, and then you're coming back. But if you participate in therapy, it can transform you. And I'll share with you, when you look for therapy, it is going to be disappointing because finding the right therapist is like a dating. Like it has to be a good match. And you will have to try out a few to find the one who's got your pulse and go with that person. I had 13 therapists and I gave up on therapy while I'm working in the field because I'm just so disappointed. And then I had a director who told me, maybe you didn't find the right therapist. So then I started looking for the right therapist and I found someone. I stayed with that person for 10 years. And it made a world of a difference. And I will, always tell people that even if you don't have coverage and you have to pay out of pocket, talk to the therapist, ask if you can do sliding scale, cut corners everywhere else, pay for it. It will work for you. You will end up going out there and making double the money and earning it all back. But don't live life in a limited way because that is more damaging.
Thank you.
I want to that question, Sister Nafisah, I want to offer a quote from, he's an Indian writer. His name is Jiddu Krishnamurti. I don't know. Oh, have you parents have
Yeah,
heard of
I know
him?
him. Yeah.
Say the name for me if you would.
Jiddu Krishnamurti.
I didn't do too bad. Okay. He said, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Let that sink in for a minute, because we, particularly us as Black people, strive so hard to integrate and be accepted and to be alike and to mimic, reflect this society, right? And this society is profoundly sick. America is sick. And as we continually try to orientate ourselves around her and integrate into her and be like her, you cannot delude yourself into thinking that you're not sick also. And so we may not feel it because fish don't see the water that they are in, right? You don't feel it. The sickness is all around you. So we don't see it. But because if you step out of it and you recognize it, you have to be able to also recognize that your integration into this sickness has also infected you as well. And so we as Black people are in a society that constantly negates us, just the Black experience alone. We're constantly negated. We're in a society that systemically is invested in our persistent and eternal oppression. And so when you look at this, how then can somebody, a Black person, live in this society and say, I'm really okay?
Thank you. And I actually want to come to Jared just to add another question to that. Can you just speak to the Black male experience? Because I know that it's even more challenging for Black men to seek out therapy.
Yeah, you dropped the gem. I was over here like, oh my God, that's good. No, but yeah, the black male experience when it comes to therapy, just again, it's just that I don't want to call it a fear. I don't really have a word for it, but just the difficulty, I'll use difficulty, just the difficulty of being vulnerable, right? Just going back to that when it comes to Black men, right? Um, talking about feelings, talking about emotions, um, talking about your experiences and how that affects you and how that impacts you, and just it's just difficult. We're not, if you think about the music that we listen to, if you look at how we're oriented into society, right? It's difficult to just to go to therapy. um I didn't really start taking therapy seriously, or I didn't really think about going to therapy until I was like in college. And even then, I wasn't even taking it serious. I didn't take it serious until I was like, yeah, something's going on and you need to go see somebody, right? And that was in grad school. When I was going through clinical mental health counseling in grad school, I'm like, okay, this is serious. Let's go see what's going on, right? But you're talking about someone who really doesn't, your black man that really doesn't know that much about therapy, and you tell them, yeah, I think you should go see a counselor or a therapist, right? And it's like, what? And talk about emotions and being vulnerable. The man, I use that word, right? But be vulnerable. I'm not used to that. That's uncomfortable. I don't
Mhm.
know what that I don't know what that means, right? It's and of course all Black men aren't monolithic. All Black men are different, right? But if we're just talking about the experience of the Black man, we're supposed to be strong. Those are the messages that we're taught. We're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be protectors. And if we already have this view of therapy being a sign of something's wrong or a sign of weakness, right? Because vulnerability usually is coupled with weakness or means weakness to people, right? Um, it's it's very difficult to get them there, right? Somebody just put in the chat toxic masculinity.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, that's real. Toxic masculinity is real. But yeah, it's like and I'm not gonna take up too much more time, but I was doing I don't want to call it a conference, but just like a talk, a public speaking event for some children, for some high school kids, all Black in East Orange. It was all virtual. Somebody asked me to do it. And it was about Black men and mental health. And one of the kids said, yeah, my father taught me I had to be strong for my family. I can't show emotions. And I can't show any emotions because that's a sign of weakness. And I said, young man, where do you think those emotions gonna go? you think you just gonna just suppress them and nothing's gonna happen? I'm like, no, I keep this water bottle here. This is my office, right? I keep this water bottle here because I always give my clients this example. When you suppress your emotions and you don't have no outlet or no way of getting them out, it's like shaking this soda bottle. Just imagine this is a soda bottle. It's like shaking this bottle up and then opening it. You're going to explode. It's inevitable. Emotions need to go somewhere. So whether you're writing it down, talking to somebody, whatever, they have to go somewhere. You got to get them out. So if we're able to utilize that outlet to get those emotions out, it's like shaking the soda bottle up. It's slowly opening up that cap. You know what I'm saying? And so I gave that young man that definition or that analogy, and but I say all that to say is those are the continuous messages that are being taught to men, period. Whether you're Black, white, Indians, Hispanic, those are the messages that are being taught to men, period, whether it's directly or indirectly. You know what I'm saying? Whether your parents are teaching you or society is teaching you. You know, I gave the example of me and Rodell earlier and just saying, imagine us being on the bus with the track team and we start crying. People would look at us like we were crazy. They would be like, what's wrong with you? Why are you crying? You're not supposed to be crying. You're a man, you're a boy, whatever. And I think those are some of the things that can prevent Black men, particularly from going to therapy, especially in this culture of, it is what it is, or I don't care. You're not really supposed to show that emotion again. It's just, so those are the factors that I think, I'm kind of rambling now, but those are the factors that I think come into play in terms of talking about Black men and going to therapy, or what barriers are there when it comes to going to therapy.
And there are way too few Jareds in this field.
Yeah.
Way too few.
Listen, when I tell you that when people find me or people hear that I'm a therapist, they're like, "Oh my God, you're a Black male therapist. Like, you're like a unicorn in this field. Like, I've been looking for a Black male therapist." And I get it so much. And it's like, I'm to the point where we created, again, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, so we created a group called the Counseling Brothers of Atlanta. It's like, and Atlanta's huge. There's like 40 of us in there. Atlanta is huge. 40.
So I feel like I didn't even get to half the questions that I wanted to ask. We may have to do like a part 2 or something. But there are 2 more points that I want to make before we get to some of the attendees' questions. I definitely want to answer their questions. But before we get to that, I do have 2 more questions or maybe 3, sorry. But to Sister Renee, I just wanted to ask, being a mother, being someone who is religious or spiritual, how did you kind of balance your faith? Because I feel like as a Black community or communities of color, religion and spirituality is so ingrained in us that some people think that, you could kind of just pray your problems away or just pray your mental illness away. So I'd like you to just speak a little bit to how you kind of balanced your faith with the realities of mental illness.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful for the teachings in the spiritual and religious organization I belong to, the Nation of Islam, because we are taught not only to just pray, but pray and then go to work. So you can't, there's, to just pray and hope that a serious mental illness will miraculously reverse itself is just not realistic. I often tell this story, and I have to tell it again. When Radell was, I don't even think he was diagnosed yet, or he could have been, but I got a call from Parentep, and I don't know how you got the number of Parentep. I think maybe you screened Radell. Is that how we met? You screened him at Trinitas. And so he, gave me his background. He just told me what he could do, told me the organization he belonged to and what services they offered. And, I was so perturbed. I was so upset because, again, his organization offers help to family members of the mentally ill. And so, I was like, I don't need help. How are you going to help my son? That was in my mind, but then, after a while, it takes, I don't know, it takes some experiences, it takes some hitting some brick walls, but after a while you realize that you have to seek out help in this, going through something like this. And so I remember that conversation ended at first, and I just felt like this was a person who couldn't help me, and it was a waste of my time and everything. I was so upset. But I found his card or something he had given me, and I said, it's time for me to reach out. And so I did, and while the journey has still been difficult, it's been far less difficult than it would have been had I tried to go it alone. And at that time, myself and my husband, we needed all the help that we could get. And so that was the balance. And it actually helped it actually helped many of the fundamentals of our religion materialize in my life right then and there. Many aspects of it just began to materialize and become manifest and make a lot more sense in depending on Almighty God, but doing the footwork as well. So, and I can say that, it's been a journey, but I've been able to, by the grace of God and the angels that He has sent me in Parentep and Joyce and the organization and my sisters and my family, to still be here now and, you know, not be in need of any medical management myself, you know, because it can take you there, really can take you there. And so it's been that.
Thank you. And then I want to switch over to Parentep because I've had friends come up to me and, you know, they felt that one of their friends were experiencing maybe some mental health issues, but because this isn't something that's taught in schools, they had no idea what to do. So, Parentep, can you just speak to what you would say to maybe those friends or family members who may think that someone in their family or in their friend group is experiencing some kind of mental health concern?
Okay, so I want to address the paradigm under which we live. Like individualism is like big in America. You take care of yourself. You know, we are kind of made to imagine like every one of us is equal and we are self-sufficient living in a vacuum, which is not true. We all have our moments. And it is most of the time a caring, loving family member or a friend who will be the first diagnostician, who will point out and say, wait a minute, this is not you. You don't sound yourself. The person who is suffering, hurting, and going through something, we may not even know it. They may not be aware of it. But it is a family or friend who will be the first one to say something is not right. Believe your gut, trust your gut feeling. And if you see something, say something, do something, don't act like you didn't see what you just saw. Because minute you do that, the humanity in you starts dying. The minute you limit yourself as a human, something inside you starts dying. So don't do that. Put yourself out there and say it in a me statement that it bothers me to see you live with a less quality of life. Can we talk about this? It upsets me to see you not happy. It upsets me to see you not being yourself. Can we talk about it? I don't mean to cross any boundaries here. This is a motivational way of engaging people and saying that, you know, you are a kind of person, I see you working, married, doing this, doing that, whatnot. And somewhere you seem to be a little lost, a little stuck. Can we talk about it? And then say, listen, we all have home remedies for small problems. Like you have a headache, do this. And if you have a footache, do that. But when things reach a certain level, you say, you need to see a doctor. You have a toothache, you don't say, just put some clove oil. You need to see a dentist. Same way, these are mental health issues. If you're not sleeping right, not eating right, you're generally not happy, not performing, functioning like you used to. If you're feeling like there are people against you, you're thinking negative, all these things are indicating something is not right. Get help. It's okay to get help. It's confidential. Nobody knows about it. You are better off trying it out. If it applies to you, take it. Doesn't apply to you, let it go. Then find somebody else. But don't kind of raise a wall and limit your possibility of healing here. And do it out of love, do it out of care and concern and compassion. Don't make people feel this little. Don't come across patronizing like, I know better than you and you need to do this or force them. Or, you know, like if you have a teenage son, threaten to cut off their allowance unless they see the therapist. It doesn't work. Coercion doesn't work. Threats doesn't work. I've seen plenty of teenagers in therapy who will come and sit and stare at the therapist and say, you know what, my parents can force me to get here. They can't force me to like you or talk to you. Now what? You can't win by this aggressive, dominating way in which our culture operates. But love can change everything. Come from that place. And there are a lot of resources. My agency's website is mhanj.org. You can go on it. There are lots of rap lines, phone numbers. There are Zoom groups. You will find something somewhere. There's a Union County resource net on which you can find all kinds of mental health services. But you are going to feel resistance initially because you are new to this. You may not experience warm and fuzzy kind of reception from the doctor's office or from the emergency room or from the counseling office. Don't let that discourage you. Hang in there. you will find the right provider over a period of time. Find your tribe, find other people. Like say, if somebody is dealing with depression, I would tell that person, don't just blindly pick up the phone book and pick the first person. Go to a DBSA support group, Depression Bipolar Alliance support group. They are nationwide. Meet few people who have been in treatment. Find out from word of mouth who's a good doctor, who's a good therapist. That's a much better way of handpicking somebody who has a good reputation than just going by website. Trust me, I can pay somebody money and ask them to do a great website. It doesn't mean I can deliver. So that glitz and glamour of website doesn't work, but people who have made an impact in anybody's life, people don't forget and they talk about it. And that's where you go.
Thank you. The last question I had was actually kind of twofold, but Parent Tip, I think you actually spoke to it earlier. For the people who just feel like, I tried therapy, it didn't work, but Parent Tip, you kind of spoke to, having to do the research and finding someone who's a good fit. So I thank you for that answer. The last question I'm going to direct to Dr. Monique and Jared. Actually, sorry, just forgot the question. Oh, so I've heard people have come to me and said, therapists have their own, issues. Like pretty much, can you just speak to that? Why it's worth it to see a therapist, even if they may have, their own life stressors going on as well? Like, what's the point? Why would I go to somebody? They might be crazy too. That's what I've heard.
I mean, the logic is not there for me. It's like assuming the teacher knows all, that the beautician's hair is always perfect. And so there's no logic in that. However, that is the reality. We do think like that. But if we are thinking like that, allow me to disabuse you of the notion that you need somebody who's perfectly healthy, because none of us are, who's perfectly like no emotional concerns or issues at all, because none of us are that. That you need that in order for someone to be helpful. We don't need that. And I'm not one to advocate that. I think Parent Tech made the point also earlier that you need to sit in therapy and have a money exchange in order to have a therapeutic interaction. There are lots of other, maybe we call them informal ways of being able to have a therapeutic, meaningful interaction that heals. And so from the sense of like therapists have issues. I sure certainly do have issues. And I don't know any of us that do not. But I don't have to be perfect in order to help you with your stuff. In fact, the field of substance abuse, early on when I was first coming into the field, you weren't going to school and getting a degree to become a substance abuse counselor. The people who were counseling were former abusers. These were people who formerly used to use because they knew what that experience was. They knew what you needed. They knew where you were struggling. They knew where the pitfalls would be. And I'd say the same also holds true for somebody who experiences depression, somebody who experiences anxiety. You know, if I have made some measure of progress with my anxiety and my depression or my whatever it might be, I could possibly help you at least get to this point, and maybe somebody else can help you get further.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. I think I share the same sentiments. Like, where's the logic in that, right? Nobody's perfect, and nobody's 100% healthy. And you know, I was just thinking of an analogy that you can like tell a person who says, well, they got issues too. Like, why would I want to go to them to have them help me with my issues? It's kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of like would you want to go on a cruise with somebody who's never drove a boat before, or do you want to go on a cruise with somebody who's drove the boat before, right? It's kind of like the same thing. Wouldn't you want a therapist who's actually probably been through, like, if you wanted to make sense for that person, I'm saying, you know, but yeah, I think that's funny. I think that's funny, but yeah, I think that you just got to explain to that person that or people who think like that. Like no one, that's an unrealistic expectation, right? To have a therapist who has nothing going on, to have a therapist who is just totally in control of their whole life and nothing is happening to them. Like no, like even for me, I've even, you know, I even share parts about me to my clients that I feel like it's helpful and useful and will bring them to the next step in their journey of healing. I've mentioned to Nafisah, and if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, then you've seen me do interviews, but I'm diagnosed with bipolar disorder, right? And I'm fairly successful. I'm fairly successful. I'm able to live a happy life, and all that. So I say that to say, and I'm able to help my clients, right? Still, and I'm able to still perform and, Dr. Parentap said, deliver. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think whatever issues or whatever your therapist may have, as long as they're able to still perform their job, or as long as they're able to still help you in your healing journey and process. I think that's what matters, not what they have going on in the background. You know what I'm saying? Because we're taught to an extent to be able to kind of put our stuff not to the side, but just put it on hold for an hour or 50 minutes, right? And then be able, so that we're able to embrace whatever it is that you're coming to us with. And then once that 50 minutes to an hour is over, we pick our stuff back up, right? And we put it back on. But as long as it doesn't interfere, as long as you're still able to remain, for the most part, because no one can be 100% objective, but as long as you can still kind of remain objective and unbiased and things of that nature, and don't let transference or whatever counter transference get in the way, and you're able to perform and do and deliver and help, all that stuff doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I think about that. But that was funny. I actually thoroughly enjoyed that question.
I get that a lot, but I think it really does just stem to what you all spoke about before. It's the fear of being vulnerable. I think that's the main, well, there's a bunch of layers as you all have already covered. But, in this present moment, I think it's just that fear. And I think it was you, Jared, who said earlier that it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to expose yourself to a stranger and let them see all your stuff. But I can attest, as well as everyone else here can attest, how valuable and how helpful it really is. So I thank you all for answering some of the questions I had for you, but I do want to transition into the participants' questions, and I'll start with.
Can I add like a short advice to people on this note when you go out to seek psychotherapy? And it's because I have been burnt. I don't want anybody else to get burnt. So, and this is Jared and Dr. Swift, correct me if I'm wrong. Majority of people who enter in the mental health field, there is a class system. So the private therapists are over here. Hospital and partial hospital program social workers are one step little lower than that. Those who go out in the community and provide case management services, all that, are still a little lower. And then the ones who work for the PAC team and screening services, they're at the lowest bottom, okay? This is how the class system works. Now, in the upper class, the private psychotherapy world, 70% of the therapists that I know want to work for the worried well. I'm talking Upper West Side, talking about Deepak Chopra, mindful meditation, yoga, Om, get some essential oils and do aromatherapy, like take a vacation, that kind of stuff. Very few will sit with you and say, oh my God, this is what happened. I'll work with you on this trauma. I will walk with you during this pain and heartache, and you almost get tearful processing all these things, that kind of. So if you are in the mild category of your life problems, yeah, go pick up somebody. Any general practitioner will be fine because they can provide it. But if you are seeking specific services such as complicated marital therapy, complicated situation at home with a serious and persistent mentally ill, be sure that you interview several and you get what you pay for. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. But don't get linked and hooked up with the wrong provider, because I have seen so many botched up cases that it has taken years for families to then turn it around. So just roll up your sleeves and make it as part of the process that I am going to look for a job for 3 months, then I'll get hired. Don't think the first interview you'll get hired. Just like on the first date, you don't get married. So realism helps. Yeah.
Good advice.
Thank you. Thank you. I did see a question in the chat. Um, okay, it says, is it necessary for a normal person? I know we are all sick from this world, but for those who are not, like schizophrenic, etc., to check a doctor if they are really normal. I mean, like, we should check up every 3 months for general body health without waiting for people to notice that you start to do things weird. I think the question is pretty much if you are quote unquote normal or you don't have a more severe mental illness, is it essential for you to get checked out? I'm going to assume that's what the question means.
I can respond quickly to that. I see this, I've seen it with individuals, but I see it more with couples. I will get couples that will come to me because they want to get married and they want to do some premarital counseling and before they get married. And in many cases, not always all, but in many cases, they present and say, we have a good relationship, we're fine. And we just want to do this because it's this is a good standard, this is a good something to do. When they sit in the seat and begin to talk, invariably the things start to come up and reveal themselves that are patterns that are unhealthy in the relationship, or not helpful. I'm not going to necessarily say unhealthy, but would potentially be problematic in their relationship. And so while we all kind of function in this world feeling like, as long as we're not under the water, as long as we're kind of swimming and at least partially our head is above water, we kind of feel like, okay, we're fine. But don't allow that to be an indication. I would want to recommend that you do. Let me give you a more recent example. I'm sorry, I said I was going to be short, but the sisters in Muhammad's Mosque number 7 the believers did a health fair out in the Bronx last weekend, and I attended, and it was beautiful. They had physical health, but they also had mental health. They had a sister who was at a table and she had 2 quick screens and she would sit there and talk to you about the screens. And I said, you know what, let me just do this. I'm a mental health professional, right? I should be fine. I think I'm fine. Well, I did those screens and there were some elevations there, right? That I wasn't paying attention to. I wasn't paying attention to my sleep. I wasn't paying attention to my diet. And it wasn't until I took time to kind of think about it, because I did the screen and talked to someone about it, that I'm realizing, yeah, I need to pay attention. There's some stress going on here and it's manifesting in certain ways. So if you don't, you might feel fine, you might be functioning, but if you don't take the time to look, right, you'll probably be missing some things.
Thank you. Was someone gonna add to that?
No, I was only going to say good advice. That's all I was going to say.
I was going to add, just to piggyback. Sometimes you think you're normal, you think everything is good, and when in actuality there may be some things that you can uncover, right? And I could just use myself for an example. I started going to therapy, and it took therapy for me to realize that some of my experiences were actually potentially traumatic, and I was like, because sometimes we what we do as human beings is we compare ourselves, right? We say, well, I'm going through this, and this doesn't look like that, or this person is going through that, which is so much worse, so my stuff can't be that bad, right? And so I did it too. And then, like I said, it took therapy for me to realize, like, dang, Jared, actually, what you went through was pretty traumatic, and it's not normal, actually. But yeah, so I think that people can, if you think you're normal or identify as normal, you can. I think you still can learn something in therapy. You still can uncover or unpack some things. So yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
We have another question. I'm sorry.
Jared said something that I wanted to throw something else on that question. Real quick. The police community trauma program that I mentioned, with that program, we do a pre and post. The pre and post test, one of the ones that we use is the ACE survey, which is a trauma survey. One of the things that we noticed with that survey, we'll do it in the beginning, and after the second session, we do it at the end. So you mark all the experiences of trauma that you've had. We have seen there be an increase from the pre to the post. And the interesting thing is, like what Jared was mentioning, is not usually because something traumatic happened in between session 1 and session 2. It's usually because the awareness of what is traumatic has increased between session 1 and session 2. So taking time to just abreast yourself of what's going on internally, abreast yourself of what concerns are, what you should be concerned with, really does make a difference. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You meant ACE, that is adverse childhood experiences?
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think that alone, we can have Dr. Swift for 2 hours.
Yes. Indeed.
Thank you. Another question we have is depression the barometer for whether or not you are considered normal?
Meaning, if you're depressed, are you not normal? Or if you're depressed, you are normal?
I don't know. I just read the question.
I can answer that. If your life is fine, such as you have roof over your head, you got food, you got love and affection, you have a job, your family who cares about you, everything's going fine, and you are still melancholic, sad, weepy, tearful, don't feel like eating, think negatively, like everything is gloom and doom, yeah, there is a problem here. But if you come from, say, adverse childhood experience, being traumatized, victim of racism, being hurt in relationship, then it's normal. And if you don't act depressed at the time, but you pretend to be Superman, then that's a problem. So your authenticity will give you an answer.
This question wasn't asked, but you kind of just made me think of it. A lot of people think that you have to be diagnosed with depression for there to be an actual problem. But you hear the term like a functioning depressed person. So can you just speak to that, how you can pretty much have aspects or symptoms of depression and still seek out treatment, but not necessarily having a diagnosed major depressive disorder or something like that?
Sure. See, the actual mental state of a depressed person can be unhappy, sad, but their behavior can be functioning, such as they meet the basic needs of their family and they are able to work and function, but from inside they're unhappy. And that is called masked depression. And it can go on for years, 10 years, 15 years. And one day you find somebody hung themselves or jumped off a bridge. And then you see these TV reporters interview people and neighbors say, oh, Mr. So-and-so was fine. I mean, he's the best neighbor. We used to say hi. He goes for a walk with his dog and everything's fine. Well, somebody missed the cue. The person was not well, but they covered it up well and they put their affairs in order and they did their exit. So just because a person is acting to be okay doesn't mean they're okay. And it is a reciprocal relationship. If the world around is not receptive to a person who is crying out for help, or the first time they started talking about not being well and not feeling well, and people did not receive them and reinforce it with a positive response like, oh my God, are you okay? Let's talk about it. Is there anything I can do? Then people learn to shut down. People don't reach out for help because they have been hurt when they reached out for help. So they're hurting to begin with. Why get more hurt by reaching out for help? And that's how it gets worse. So it is kind of a symptom of a sick society where a person who is hurting is not able to seek help because you are made to feel ashamed of hurting, so to speak. So these are the kind of people who need somebody to support them, help them, and guide them.
Thank you. So we had a few questions that were asked before the panel began. The first question is, what are some healthy ways / advice you could give to being consistent with your mental health? Yes.
Okay, so I don't want to sound like what Parent Tep described earlier as one of the I forgot how you termed it, the worried well. But I love mindfulness and techniques to de-stress and do self-care. I'm a huge advocate of self-care, though I don't always do it for myself. But I am a huge advocate, and I teach that a lot to people. And when we talk about self-care, often, when you ask people about self-care, people think of, going on vacation or going out for a party or spending time with people. People often think about moments. But I always have to kind of help to kind of shift the understanding that self-care is a daily practice. It's not something you do once a year. It's not something you do once a month. It is a daily practice. And so that's an important piece that you could go on ad infinitum about, what you can do and some ways to do it. It could be, for me, honestly, I feel good self-care is when I get through my to-do list. It might be stressful doing it, but when I get to the bottom of my to-do list, I feel good. When I've cleaned my house, I feel good. And so you figure out what it means to you. Most people don't want to clean their house for self-care, but I know that does something for me. So you've got to figure out what that means to you. But also mindfulness, which is such a huge area, and so many styles and different ways to do mindfulness and meditations. And I always tell people, just jump on YouTube and put mindfulness in. You'd be surprised what's there. Find out what fits you, find out what, fits your style. So there are things that are an hour long or hours long. There are things that are just kind of a minute. You can do a mindful minute. And so find out what works for you and do that, because there are certainly ways that you can weave into your everyday experience things that would be helpful and good to help you de-stress and heal.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would suggest practice being authentic, genuine, and truthful. And you will find that you are unable to be honest and genuine with some people in certain things, and you'll start finding your answers. And if you are having difficulty, then get a life coach. And life coaching is a new field, but it is for those who are motivated and want to grow and learn. In life coach, there are categories of spiritual coaches, and there are lots of groups, meetups that sort of, there is something called the law of attraction, for example. You go there and they talk about how you can, with a positive attitude, invite positive things to your life. But dabble into everything. Like there is another website called dhamma.org, DHAMMA. It's a 10-day meditation retreat in silence, free of cost. It is just done by volunteers. So say you go to the Berkshires, you stay in one of their pagodas, and you are in silence for 10 days, and they give you instructions how to sort of breathe and go through it. But you come out from that retreat transformed, because we are not used to being in touch with our real, genuine self. And we have forgotten how to sort of identify what's bothering us, and switching off the Wi-Fi and the detoxing from all the digital devices and having quiet time for oneself is, I think, the best solution right now to most of our problems. We are way too plugged in, which is a distraction. It's just like a workaholic, alcoholic, gambling, or somebody who's like constantly on social media. So stop running away.
Can you please put that in the chat? The silent retreat, you said?
Sure.
Thank you.
The next question is, what suggestions do you have about centering spirituality in issues of healing mental health? African spirituality, oop, I hope I didn't cut it off. African spirituality, um, or maybe how can African spirituality be a tool for addressing intergenerational trauma? I'm sorry, that's a three-part question, so maybe I should break it down. Because there's three questions in that. But the first part is, what suggestions do you have about centering spirituality and issues of healing mental health?
Go ahead, Jared. Did you want?
I was just gonna say read it again.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll read all three because they seem connected. It says, what suggestions do you have about centering spirituality and issues of healing mental health? How can African spirituality be a tool for addressing intergenerational trauma? Is there a relationship between intergenerational trauma and ancestral healing? So that's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't really incorporate spirituality into my counseling. And the reason why is because, everybody just has different beliefs, right? And I don't know where people are at on their spiritual journey, and I don't want to impose where I am at in my spiritual journey onto my client, right? And so I don't really bring it up. I don't bring it up at all. If they bring it up, we can talk about it a little bit and more so in how they incorporate it in their lives, and how it can be helpful, because there are studies that show that if you believe in a higher power, that you're more likely to find more meaning in life and things of that nature. So I do think spirituality in mental health has its place, but I just don't incorporate it that much into my practice unless my client brings it up. So, and then as it comes to the next question, I don't know much about African spirituality, and I think the last question was ancestral work into intergenerational trauma. I haven't explored that much, so I really don't have answers for those last two questions.
So in terms of centering spirituality, I think like Jared, in my practice, if or as spirituality comes up, as religion comes up, I will deal with it. I don't, introduce it necessarily into the session. Sometimes I'll ask about it, but depending upon where the client is how I operate with that. However, that said, from an African-centered rather, spiritual perspective, you cannot really divorce, good, healthy mental health from spirituality. It's all interdependent. It's all one and the same. And so as we begin, I think in this field to move toward, using for Black people in particular, I know I am, and I know a lot of colleagues who are as well, are moving more towards an African, spiritual, African-centered way of working with Black people. I think it offers more of a depth of healing, because we begin now to introduce levels of pain and trauma that haven't been touched, that haven't been healed, that haven't even been given air. And I think we often, in the therapy room, we kind of bring what's happening out there in the world into the therapy room, and we enact it. And what do I mean by, we live in a European white dominated world. And even though there are two Black people in the room, that comes into the room with us. My white dominated mind and my client's white dominated mind interact together with the expectation that we don't talk about this stuff. And the more you begin to interject it in by maybe asking a question, you'd be surprised. I had a conversation with a client recently about identity and her identity development. She's a Panamanian, but if you look at her, you would think she's what I call garden variety Black person, right? But she's Panamanian and Black, Panamanian and Black. And so it was something that she had never thought about, that sense of who she is and where that stems from and how it manifests in her life. And it was enriching for her to begin to explore that. And I think the same with spirituality. What does that mean? What does spirit mean? Most of us function on that level and don't really realize it. We say, oh, well, if the spirit moves me or a spirit told me. We hear that language, but we don't really honor the meaning of it. So I think it's there for us, but the more we unearth it, the more we give it life, the more we breathe into it, the more we can come in contact with what is germanely, intuitively, and organically ours, uniquely ours as Black people.
Thank you.
It's very refreshing to hear both of you like having such a holistic approach, because it is not seen on a, the average treatment providers don't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be sending you people.
I was going to say the same thing, Parentette, because it's not there are not a lot of holistic therapists out there who would even embrace anything other than the very stringent status quo of let me give you a prescription. As a matter of fact, that book that you gave me, Parentette, it was absolutely amazing. The book, it's a therapist, a psychologist who just wrote a book about his journey and his experience and learning that his field was a lot of medical management, a lot of kickbacks, doctors, prescribing drugs to receive perks from pharmaceutical companies, and that the whole field is just unfortunately laced with doctors who just do, write prescriptions for the sake of the perks that they're going to get for that year. But the book was amazing. So it is so refreshing to hear holistic approaches to therapy. And it's so, just so, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of therapists who do that. It's so not available, unfortunately. But
What's
I think
the name of, I'm sorry, sis. What's the name of the book, if you could?
Do you remember Parentette? Because if not, I'm going to go get it.
Unhinged. The name of the book is Unhinged.
Unhinged.
Okay.
Unhinged.
Thank
Excellent
you.
book. I have to return it to you, Parentette.
That's fine. Yeah, but I'll add this to the conversation we're having, is that for the Caucasian client, individual therapy might be the norm and it may work. For the African American client or the Indian client or Latino client, you need to have a family therapy angle, community-based treatment angle, because it is all intertwined. And you cannot pluck them out and fix them and send them back. You need to fix the whole system, or at least how they're dealing with the whole system. So a lot of my work is kind of helping people heal those, repair those relationships, because you can't get healthy and go back to what? To a sick system, then you're going to relapse again.
That's right.
I totally agree with that. I've been telling myself when I first started doing the work in intergenerational trauma, I said, if I'm going to do this, you have to start learning about family systems. You got to start learning about like genograms and stuff like that, so that you can really understand what's going on in the family. Because if you're talking about intergenerational trauma, it's generations, family. Like, you gotta treat the family as well. I totally agree with that. And then, of course, you got to incorporate the community. Now what that looks like is a different question. But I do think that's extremely important. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember. But yeah, I totally think that's important. So.
And I just, on that, this connects also with the African-centered approach that from an African-centered perspective, there was not a notion of illness in an individual. That illness was within connections between individuals. So when a person was disconnected from, disjointed from, when there were issues in relation to other people, therein lied the crux of illness. And so that's very a stark contrast to a European perspective, where it's very, you know, they have a very reductionist way of looking at things, and it's in the person, that the illness lies in the person. And so, like Jared is saying, if you, when you're working with a Black client, and also parents have as emphasized, when you're working with a Black client, it is really critical to work with or to ask about and investigate and explore, what are their relationships, what's going on, how are they connected, are the relationships healthy, are they not? And so these are some of the things that are also important to know and work with when you're working with, I would say, a non-white client. Like Parent Tep is saying, it's not far, you know, it's very similar with Latino clients. And I work with a fair amount in Rahway of Indian clients as well. And family, or that connection of community, is really important there as well. And so I do want to, before like you go into another one, I want to see if we can try to touch on that last part of the question about intergenerational trauma, ancestral. I don't remember what it is, but
Is there a relationship between intergenerational trauma and ancestral healing?
Oh,
I wonder if they mean on the, you know, in traditional African healing. I wonder if that's what they're referring to, you know, because some, you know, some in some families or may just have that in their ancestry, you know, where they use that type of traditional medicine healing of ritual and things like that. I don't know if that's what the person.
I think the question is hinting at like like traditional Western African ritualistic like type of sexuality, ancestral healing, and how that incorporate, or how can you incorporate that into intergenerational trauma. And the reason why I don't talk about it is because I just don't have enough knowledge based on it. And I'm not just going to just jump out the window and be like, yeah, this is what I think. And I really don't have knowledge based on it. But I actually think I know who wrote that question. One of my close friends who does that type of work, actually. So, and I think she wanted to see what we all thought about it. Yeah.
I'd like to speak to it a little bit. I'm sorry, Sis Renee.
Go ahead, Sis.
Again, from an African perspective, there is continuity. The idea between, you know, those of us on the earthly plane and those of us on the ancestral plane, we coexist from an African spiritual perspective. There's continuity there. We interact. Their energy feeds us, our energy feeds them. So whereas from a European perspective, you die, you're gone, that's it. That's not so from an African perspective. Your spirit lives on. There's like a saying or a proverb, that something to the effect of that you're alive as long as someone mentions your name. As long as your name is remembered, as long as your name is invoked, your spirit is still alive. And so there is this understanding that there's a dynamic interaction between the spirit realm and the earthly realm. And so when you're talking about ancestral healing, there is, I guess, how am I trying to say, ancient understanding or ancient wisdom that points to the fact that what we do today, us on the earthly plane, can impact and heal the spirit, can impact and heal our ancestors. And so we know that we have lineages of intergenerational trauma. And so sometimes it feels like when we first started beginning to talk about intergenerational trauma, it kind of felt like a death sentence, like this is our problem and this is what we're dealing with. And it didn't feel like there was any relief. But when you begin to look at that from an African-centered perspective, and you understand that we stand on, and we are the embodiments of the spirits of all of those great people who came before us, that they are alive within us, and that we feed them and they feed us, then you can begin to look at healing, not just healing ourselves, but also healing the injuries of the past. And I feel like that may be what that question is pointing to. And I will hope that that person will come back and do a follow-up on that question if that's off.
Thank you.
Parent had mentioned something interesting that I totally agree with, the family unit as we know it today. He mentioned it earlier. We're very individualistic right now, whereas a long time ago, we looked to the elders to help us. I was watching this program and it centered around the way certain tribes, women in certain tribes give birth. And when they got ready to give birth, the entire tribe of women came to support that one woman who was giving birth, because childbirth can be traumatic. And so not only did they soothe her and talk to her and rub her and give her, aromatherapy and just supported her in every way imaginable while she gave birth to a new life. And so that family unit of helping one another is not as existent as it was a long time ago. And that in and of itself can lead to some traumas that otherwise would not be there had we had the support of the family unit. And when I say family unit, I'm not just talking about the 4 people, I mean the tribe. So it's a lost thing. I was talking to my daughter about how a long time ago, not too long ago, but it's not as common now, when a man came to a woman's father to, ask for her hand in marriage. And likewise, a female, anyone seeking, anyone entertaining the thought about getting married, depended on the information from their elders. And even you see it, and not that I advocate this one way or the other, but you see it in arranged marriages, because an elder can look and say, I know you, baby girl, and I know that this is not going to work for you, because that whole family right there, not that it's bad, it's just not the dynamic that's going to work for you, the way you were raised, the way your family unit works, and so, but we don't seek the elders' advice anymore, and we don't look to things that just used to be commonplace. We're very individualistic. As long as mine is okay, me and mine is okay, that's it, and I don't need your advice. Don't solicit it to me. I don't want any unsolicited advice. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that family unit that was very prevalent with our ancestors is no longer intact in this country, not the way it was.
And the European, I guess, worldview is one that is, it, like Parent Tep and Sister Renee are saying, is very individualistic, even almost at the sacrifice of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to begin to come into the awareness and the recognition that that is not our soul. That's not our spirit. That's not who we are. And though we are in this Get Out experience, the movie, where we have someone else's mind in our bodies, but it's our bodies. So though we're in this Get Out experience, the more we can begin to kind of like extricate that thinking and allow who we truly are as original people to come into the fibers of of our beings, then we can begin to become whole. We can begin to come healthy, not as individuals, but as a community.
Thank you. Some of the questions here we've actually answered, as far as why there is such a stigma. We touched on that. But another question was, what are some ways to encourage Black men to seek out the mental health treatment they so desperately need?
And we're all looking
Jared
at you, Jared.
laughed.
We're all looking at you. Give us some answers.
Yeah, you gotta sell it. You really do. You gotta sell it. You gotta make it appear, or not make it appear. You have to sell it to where we can understand or conceptualize how therapy can be beneficial for us, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like Parent Tap said, therapy happens in many different forms, not just in the office, right? So a lot of my friends, they're like, "Oh, you the therapist? What you think about?" Like, bro, I've been in the room all day, and you want you want me to do therapy on 4 hours? Come on, man. Nah, but you gotta yeah, you gotta sell it in some way. Like, it could be through like your own experiences. Like, hey, like this is what therapy's done for me. Like this is, just imagine what it could do for you, and that can be helpful. I know, again, just even sharing your experience. Um, I know that's what I try to do for for friends or just people who may come to me and be like, may have some reservations about therapy altogether, and then maybe a black man, again, just sharing your experiences, trying to tell it to them in some type of way. And I feel like saying sell it to them sounds bad, but or has like a negative connotation to it, but that's not how I genuinely mean it. Again, just really just trying to show them that there's benefits to it, and it
No,
can.
but yeah, but I think as I'm hearing you, I feel like you, as Jared, invested in another black man's life and future. And when you come from that place, even the toughest will break and they will be, you know what, I'll give him a chance because he cares. And I think that element is missing because people tend to recommend, ask, and say without making themselves vulnerable and say that it pains me to see you hurt and I care about you. And what can I do to make it easy for you? And I think you are a good role model. So it kind of helps people to be, all right, he's cool. So then I will listen to you. And I'm sure you use all kind of techniques, talk about sports and talk about music and, your bag of tricks, but you get them in. And once they come to you, I think after they put their guard down, they stay and they benefit, right?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest key, right? And you mentioned it kind of earlier when you said that, when you're looking for your therapist, it's like shopping around. And I think the biggest part of therapy, what they teach in school as well, is just that rapport. So me, I'm constantly trying to build rapport. I'm constantly trying to, make things relate. So that, if I'm talking to like a 17-year-old, black male, I'm I'm not speaking as if I'm on a panel, right? I'm speaking as if we're from the same type of neighborhood. I understand what you're talking about. I understand the lingo, And so I'm regurgitating it back to them, and they're like, "Oh, snap! Like he knows what I'm talking about. It's pretty cool." Like so that all matters, right? That all matters. I think Parasite, you definitely hit it right on the nose. So yeah, definitely.
And also, you may have said this already, Jared. I lost a little bit of your sound, so I don't know if I'm being redundant, but that there is another way to get black men, I think, in um, black men that's out there. There are many of you who already been in therapy. Let's be real. I've worked with many black men in therapy. So you do come to therapy. You may not be the first one at the door, and your wife may have beat you to get you there. But there are black men who are in therapy. But you could be the best salesman. When you have actually been a consumer of something, you usually can sell it well if you had a good experience. Many people don't have a good experience, but many have. And so those black men who have been in therapy, stop teaching your young boys, if you are, to suck it up and move on because we don't cry. But hey, let's talk about it, right? And then as they get older and get teenage, share that you have gone into therapy and you found it helpful, and this was what you can recommend and sanction for them as well. Share it with your boys, right? Share it with your partners. And this is also a way that we can help to kind of you know reduce that apprehension that many black men have about therapy.
The next question is, how can I find therapists of color that take my health insurance?
Therapy for black. Oh, sorry.
Go, 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 go.
TherapyforBlackGirls.com. You have therapyforblackmen.org, I think it is. And you can also go on psychologytoday.com as well and just sift through the therapist that's in your zip code, and you can check what insurance they take. You can even like filter it to your insurance and all of that. So there's and you can go through your insurance and you can tell them that I prefer a black female or black male or whatever it is that you prefer. So those are some different routes that you can do.
Definitely, definitely. when COVID hit, I was getting emails from everywhere, all of these different databases that wanted to put together, because of the need, that wanted to put together, databases of Black therapists. There were dozens of them that I was getting emails for. So that's happening. So just, it's not, something, there is a trail there that you can follow, but I want to add a shameless plug in here. Because as I said, I'm president of the New Jersey Association of Black Psychologists, an organization of distinguished Black conscious clinicians, right? And others, not everybody's not a clinician. You have researchers, you have professors, you have all kinds of professionals in this organization. But these are people who are like you and understand you. And so I would recommend and strongly suggest that you go to the website. We're about to get a new website and come probably by the end of this month, but go to the website and check out our referral directory. It's njabpsi.org, njabpsi.org. Go to the website. We have a referral directory, but we are not the only ones in existence. The New Jersey Association of Black Social Workers also is gearing back up, and I'm seeing activity out of them. For a little while, they weren't there, but if you have looked in the past and you didn't find them, look again. The New Jersey Association of Black Social Workers is another group of conscientious Black clinicians who understand you and care for you. They're there. Look up, find their website, find their referral list. There are also two, I would say, premier hubs for Black therapy, and not just therapy, but you're talking about holistic healing. Also true, you might find Reiki therapists on this site, Black Reiki therapists, Black spiritual advisors, coaches, and so forth. And that is a Black Community Resource Directory. And that's hosted by the National Association of Black Social Workers. So it's Black Community Resource Directory. You want to look that up. And then also from the Association of Black Psychologists, National Association, there are a group of people that have started Black Therapy Central. Phenomenal. Go on to Black Therapy Central. They're still building that out. There are few clinicians listed right now, but that is growing and will continue to grow. So Black Therapy Central is another resource. If you are a Black student and you are struggling, you're on campus or what have you, or even if you're not on campus, it doesn't really matter. If you're a young Black person, Seed Fund, they have a hotline that is specifically culturally sensitive, culturally aware people who are wanting to, be there, be on the other end of the line when you need and want somebody to talk to. Go look up Seed Fund. Steve, if I could just give a little bit of history, is my little cousin. My first cousin's son, who is a brilliant young man, Harvard graduate. He, just special in so many different ways, so personable, but he has schizophrenia and he killed himself. And so the family started the Seed Fund to try to help other young people who may be struggling from going down the same fate, because as we see, there's a huge gap that they're not getting attended to. So Seed Fund is another resource that you can use. The resources are out there, people. They're out there. So we just have to dig in. Just one last one. The Black Family Summit recently started a Community Cares listening line. I'm one of the people on the other end of that line. And Community Cares listening line, you can Google that as well. And basically right now it's just in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. But if you are under distress, we started that specifically for like the first responders during this COVID, but first responders is everybody. It's all of us. And so we define that very loosely, but look up the Community Cares listening line. That's another resource that can be a first line. Even if you don't want to talk, you just say, I need this. We have loads of resources that we can offer and give to you that might be helpful. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take so long, but there are resources out there, and I'm so big on connecting people with resources. Thank you.
Sister Monique, if you and Jared can put the resources that you mentioned, at least some of them in the chat, really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was going to try to collect resources that everyone has shared thus far to send out to the attendees. So
Okay.
if people want to send me their emails, I can definitely send the resources that have been submitted thus far. I do want to start to wrap up because we've actually been here 2.5 hours,
Oh,
which is
wow.
crazy.
Mhm.
We may have to do a part two if you all are open. I did see someone in the chat ask for a part two. But I am greatly appreciative. I will read the last question. Paratep did go ahead and listen to it, but I will just read it aloud just in case anyone else was wondering. The question was, as a therapist, how do you measure your levels of success or if therapy is no longer needed? And Parentep said, you set goals that are observable, measurable, and periodically you check if there is progress. The client and the therapist do this together. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you, panelists, for participating. Hopefully we can get together again to answer some of the other questions that may be coming through as a result of this. But I'm greatly appreciative and okay, yeah, I see some of the resources coming in. So thank you all, and I hope that you will enjoy the rest of your day. If there's just one thing to close, one thing that you could leave the participants with, what would that be? And everyone can just answer if we can just perhaps make it brief, because I know that some of you have to leave. One thing that you would like to leave the participants with, one takeaway.
If I could just say that someone had asked about getting Black men into therapy, but I just want to say keep at it. Parent had mentioned ways that you can lovingly suggest that someone go into therapy, Black male or Black female, but particularly Black male. As the mom of a young man with a serious mental illness, I wish, and I know I've learned to not harbor on my regrets, but I do wish that I had seen some signs earlier because, again, we don't look at anything as a mental illness or poor mental health. Back when Rodell first started showing really, really serious signs, we chalked it up to irresponsibility, you know, and just not taking school seriously. And we mentioned, Sister Monique, you mentioned your cousin's son. Most of the diagnosis, serious mentally, excuse me, I'm sorry, Cadence. Uh, Most of the serious diagnosis come at that age. Usually it's at high school, early years of college where something happens. When I first went into a group session with intensive family support services, I was absolutely floored at how many people were in there telling the same exact story as mine. It was like we were all and to an extent talking about relatively the same person because they were going through some of the same things. And it was the same age group and they were showing some of the same symptoms. So just keep at it. If you know anyone that you love, that you care about, and you see that something is off, keep at it. Don't feel like, you shouldn't say anything, or that's his business or whatever. Keep at it and try and get them to open up to you or suggest someone else talk to them. Just don't give up on the person. And I also just want to say that, you know, therapy early, taking care of your mental health early can prevent a serious mental illness. Perhaps, I don't know, but perhaps had my son had some good therapeutic sessions with a good therapist, it could have prevented the cycle of medication after medication after medication, which, by the way, these medications, they just pretty much keep prescribing until they find the right cocktail. So you pretty much, in the beginning, you become a human guinea pig until you get the right cocktail. So, and you don't know what type of damage that is causing. So had the mental health, had the therapy been involved early on, instead of just here's a prescription, here's a prescription, here's a prescription, who knows? So I just want to say to everyone out there, take your mental health seriously. Take it seriously just as much as you take your next designer handbag serious, or your next pair of Jordans serious, or your next anything that's important to you. This is even more important for yourself and for any of your loved ones. Take it seriously to prevent a SMI, a serious mental illness. And I also just want to plug diet. Parent Tep, you did a segment one day about the brain gut relationship that I attended at IFSS, and Sister Monique mentioned it as well. Diet, diet, diet. You think all of those chemicals that you're throwing in your body, I'm sorry to say, your Doritos and your all of your snacks and all of the stuff that we eat, you know, when we drink, and even environmental, it has an effect. And not that it could cause it, I don't know that, I'm not a scientist, but it can certainly contribute to poor mental health. So watch your diet and try to, like Parent Tech said, unplug. All of these things have helped me. You know, unfortunately, we haven't gotten the right balance for my son yet, but it has definitely helped me to maintain a certain balance. So that's what I would like to leave everyone with.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to give a really short and quick one. I mean, we all can talk for until tomorrow morning. We have a lot to share. But I would suggest that whatever you are going through in life, find your tribe. If you are in alcohol recovery, find an alcoholic who has recovered and be friends with them, learn from them. How did they do it? If you have a son or daughter with mental illness and you are struggling, find somebody who has it but has been dealing with it 5 years ahead of you. Learn from them. You will find that there is immense amount of wisdom from people who have been in the same boat and circumstances. They share it very freely, willingly. It is gold. It is as good as therapy or even better than therapy in many cases. And please don't give control to the larger systems, whether it is psychiatrists, therapists, uh, any mental health system, hospitals, police, anyone. Keep control to yourself, in the sense, inform yourself, educate yourself of your rights, what are their obligations, and come from that place of empowerment and entitlement. What you are asking for is your right. They are there to serve you. And don't feel like anybody can treat you in a discounting, dismissive way. Very assertively, confidently, keep advocating for yourself and ask for the best quality care.
I, I the words of James Baldwin are coming to mind when he said that to be Black and I think partially conscious in this society is to be enraged most all of the time. And we that there's a lot that's implied in that quote, but we know being in this society renders us in a condition that is not well. It renders us to be in a condition of deep stress, under deep oppression. We live under that. We're finally beginning to talk about it. We're finally beginning to acknowledge that. And I'm thankful for that, because that's going to lead to where we need to go right now, which is to our healing. And so I just want to say in my last words that today, right now, it is time for our healing. There's been enough injury, there's been enough hurt, there's been enough pain. It is time for our healing. So let's move toward our healing today. And in so doing, we have to begin to look to one another, because no one man can rise above the condition of their people, right? So we have to lean on one another. We have to look to one another as we begin to heal, because I can heal myself, but if everyone else around me in my tribe, right, as Parent Tep is referring to, is ill and sick, gonna pull me right back down. So we have to look and lean on one another. And so, you know, I'm reminded also of the words of Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He said, our unity is more powerful than a nuclear bomb. And so to that also, I want to add that our unity is a bomb, BALM. It is a bomb to heal what we have been going through. Our unity is critical today.
Man, how do I follow up after all of that? All right.
Wait, you sound a little bit low, Jared.
Can y'all hear me? Y'all hear me better now? Let's
Yes.
see. Okay, cool. Uh, Last words for everybody. It's probably gonna sound really similar to Dr. Swift, but I truly believe in healing. I truly believe that we are headed in that direction. I believe that we've gone so many years passing down trauma, promoting trauma, in certain ways, and I feel like we're going to a culture of promoting healing, and I'm here for it. And I feel like we should all, in one way, shape, or form, participate in some type of healing for ourselves and for our community. We so desperately need it, and I think that's the way we'll be able to, overcome, this system. And so, it really mean a lot for it.
Thank you. And thank you all. I really, really do appreciate it. I
Excuse me, Precious. I mean, Nafisa, I'm sorry. Sorry.
yes.
That's no, I just wanted to thank all
And
of you
she
because it does. Yeah, I wanted to thank all of you because this has actually been therapeutic. It's the first time I've sat still for more than an hour at least, in a long time. And just, so it's been therapeutic. And I just wanted to thank all of you.
Thank
I
you.
can say the same.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And
Yes,
thank you,
thank you.
Nafisa.
Yes.
So thank you, Nafisa, for putting it together.
I definitely appreciate each of your inputs, and I don't know, it just definitely means a lot to me. This is something that I wanted to do again for our hometown, but I think that it worked out because now we're able to reach even more people. I saw a need for it in Roselle, but the reality is that there's a need for it everywhere. So I really do appreciate each of you. Again, hopefully I see somebody else talking about part 2. So hopefully at some point we can do this, because I know that we all have our own individual and very busy schedules and everything like that. So I appreciate you taking the time out to participate today. So thank you all, and hopefully I will speak to each of you soon. So
Before you end, Nafisa, do you have all of those resources that they put in the chat?
I will try to well, I have it so that it saves, so I will be sure to.
Okay, but you know what? I know all of you. I could call you all and get it. Okay.
All right, sound good.